Sitting on another 5-game losing streak, Matt Eberflus is starting to sound more and more defeated, like a coach who might know what fate is coming for him. And it makes me wonder if the players might respond poorly to that, and if things might start getting worse here if the energy level isn't up on the road for Thanksgiving against the Detroit Lions.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On the show today, we check in on the energy of the team and of Matt Eberflus and what sounds to me like a different tone of wearing down from another losing streak and a streak of games losing in heartbreaking, difficult, excruciating fashion at the end. Like, not just getting blown out or anything, but like the last two games, right? You get your hopes up, you think you're going to win at the end, and you don't, or at least you think you have a chance to win at the end. And then, the Commanders game a few weeks before that. And how, if that's starting to leak through your head coach a little bit, how is that reflecting on the players? And we'll look at, okay, the Bears have never made a head coaching change in the middle of a season before. Could this bring one about? I'm not convinced just yet, but I do want to look at what some of the possibilities might be there. And I want to start with the Matt Eberflus challenge flag logic, because that's where you detect some of the energy in this too. But also, I think before we go beyond the words, let's start with the substance here of Matt Eberflus was asked about, at his Monday press conference, throwing the challenge flag on Jordan Addison's, I think it was a 69-yard catch and run, where Bears safety Jonathan Owens came over and tried to tackle Addison and kind of shouldered him to the sideline, but Addison tiptoed the sideline and took off, and it wasn't until Kevin Byard chased him down like inside the 10-yard line downfield and made a touchdown-saving tackle that he was finally ruled down. The Bears threw the challenge flag to see if Jordan Addison had indeed stepped out when Owens failed to successfully tackle him, and the ruling on the field stood. And some of this got overlooked here because there was all this controversy over Mike Pereira comes on the broadcast and says, there's actually a boundary cam here that you can see up the sideline, but they're not allowed to use that on a coach's challenge because not every stadium has that camera angle, so it's not fair that you can use that a coach would be able to use it on a challenge here when he can't use it on a challenge in other places, so that wasn't part. And I think that lost everything in that conversation. We lost the hey, wait a minute. He's pretty clearly in bounds there, and it was a pretty bad challenge. And Matt Eberflus has been not just terrible at throwing the challenge flag, but historically bad, the worst active head coach in the NFL in terms of challenge flag throwing that he wins or loses there. The percentage, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he is statistically measured the worst at winning when he throws challenge flags. And so naturally, with another missed challenge in a situation like that comes questions from the media of hey, what's the process like there on that Jordan Addison play? Okay, so somebody's up in the booth and is supposed to signal down to you and say, hey, throw the challenge flag or don't throw the challenge flag? What's the plan here, Matt Eberflus? How does something like this happen?
Yeah, so the view of that, first of all, I threw the challenge flag because it was an explosive. It's 69 yards, and our defense did a wonderful job of stopping them, there for a field goal. I was really pleased with that part of it. But again, when that's an explosive there, we want to make sure that we want to throw that flag. And again, I understand, sideline and all that stuff, cameras and all that, but they've done a good job of replay assisting, coming in and working with that. But again, I think it's always warrants a challenge when you got that big of a gain. If it was 6 yards, no one would care. If it was 15 yards, I don't think you would care. But 70 yards, it's worth it, even if we don't have the best look that we want to have.
That explanation only makes sense for like the first half a second when you think about it. It's like, okay, yeah, wait a minute, big explosive play. It's probably a good idea to want to, take another look at it and just make sure that somebody didn't mess up in there, right? Like, okay, it's, no harm, no foul, right? But like, once you spend more than like a half a second thinking about what he said there, then it becomes pretty clear that like, wait a minute, that is not a sound or reasonable process whatsoever that an NFL head coach should be taking to evaluate when a challenge flag should be thrown. Like, on the one hand, it's easy enough to say, okay, worst case scenario, all you do is lose one timeout. But losing one timeout is not insignificant, especially if you may recall that play to Jordan Addison was in the third quarter, very early in the third quarter, which means you're in the second half and you get down to the final 2 minutes of the game and you don't have that timeout at your disposal because you lost it from a challenge. And it's one thing if you challenge a play that's very close and it could kind of go either way and you really want to put the referees on the spot to say, hey, this is a big play and it's close enough to say, yes, we should be able to overturn this, and you don't win the challenge and it's like, okay, it was a good attempt because the play was particularly close. That didn't seem to be the case here for the Jordan Addison play. Like, it wasn't obvious, but it wasn't close either. Like, and it just seems to me like any decent coaching staff and head coach should have an operation in place so that you can see a play like this and know not to challenge it on this just for the sake of challenging it, right? If there was good merit to challenge it, that's one thing. But when Matt Eberflus says it's an explosive play, so we want to throw the challenge just to make sure, even when we don't get a good look at it, if you don't get a good look at it, you shouldn't risk the timeout. You need that timeout late in a game like this. And I understand that, you're trying to just get some yards back or whatever, but like, how about you play better defense instead? Like, let's start there. Tackle him and not just bump into him and bounce off of him. Like, you have to have a better system in place and better logic than just say, oh, big play. Oh, here's the challenge flag. If there was anything iffy about it, throw the challenge flag for a big play just to make sure that the big play stands. Like, burning a timeout in the second half in particular is way too important there. Like, that's the whole reason they charge you a timeout, is so that you don't just throw the challenge flag willy-nilly on any play that you wanted to take a second look on, just in case you might be able to get some yards back there. In the first half, maybe you can have that conversation because, you can't take the timeouts with you into halftime. And so if you feel like the timeouts aren't going to be a big deal in the first half, maybe you could get into that conversation. But again, this was, I think, was it the first play of the third quarter? It was definitely in the third quarter, about early on in that third quarter. That's when that play happened. So you don't have that timeout for the rest of the game in those critical situations down the stretch when Caleb Williams is trying to will you back and get you into overtime. And against all odds, he does it even without that timeout. But it's a great example of your head coach making life more difficult for your quarterback by not having that timeout at your disposal towards the end of that game for you to take your time getting downfield and not have to make him be superhuman to work the ball and leave more time on the clock for him. So that's where it's just like, what are we doing here? This is basic head coach duty that you should hope any head coach can figure out better than what Eberflus has. But even like the tone behind it, right, as we go sort of a step back here, you just don't hear a lot of conviction behind Matt Eberflus or as much confidence in his answers on stuff. And I feel like I'm detecting some change in demeanor there that I want to explore a little bit further and keep an eye on whether this leaks to some of the rest of the team not having the right energy either. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Skylight Frames. The holiday season is here, and if you're like me, sometimes you struggle to find the perfect gift for somebody because you really want to make sure it's something that they'll appreciate and that will mean something to them and won't feel like too generic or anything. And you can really overthink it and wind up with something that's just disappointing or can't settle on anything at all. But our friends at Skylight Frames are here with the perfect gift idea for you because the Skylight Frame is a touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. So whether it's a long-distance family member that you want to keep up with or just someone that you want to always make sure that they can see the latest and greatest pictures from your loved ones. Like, it's great because you don't have to post it on social media for the whole world to see. You can just upload it right to the frame, and then your loved one can see it in their home. It's super easy to use, and the touchscreen is really a game changer because then they can swipe through photos and tap to see the new photo sent and really make it such a more of a connected experience between you and the person receiving your gift. And right now, as a special limited time offer for Locked On Bears listeners, you're going to get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's skylightframe.com/NFL. Get $20 off your purchase now. SKYLIGHT, skylightframe.com/LockedOnNFL. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers who bet $5 can get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL as well, all in one place. So if you want that $5 bet to be on Bears-Lions, right now, the Bears are 10.5-point underdogs on the road. The money line for a Bears upset is plus 430, and the over-under is set at 48.5 points. Or if you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get your $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Matt Eberflus doesn't have the same energy, confidence, conviction behind what he's saying at press conferences lately in a way that feels like a coach who's been a bit beaten down by this losing streak and maybe coming to terms a little bit with what his fate may be as Chicago Bears head coach. And, the one 30-second clip or whatever it was, the length of the clip that we played earlier about the challenge flag, is just one small sample size example here. But if you go back and listen to Matt Eberflus' press conference on Monday and even Sunday after the game, and it's been trending this way in the last couple of weeks, there's just a certain lack of energy that's hard. It's hard to, you certainly can't quantify it in any measurable way and say, he's using this word less or speaking fewer words per minute or something, but it just doesn't feel like the same Matt Eberflus we heard earlier this season. I think he came into this season with a lot of confidence that he would defend himself a little bit, and he was certainly more willing to kind of joke with the media, and he was more of a friendly fun, a little bit more loose, and saying, we're going to take care of the football, and we're going to do all this stuff and play as a team and complementary football and all this stuff, and it was like a lighter, more fun Matt Eberflus. And of course, it would be tone deaf if he was fast and loose and still smiling and winking and giving a nudge or whatever during the losing streak. But I think there's a middle ground between where he was and where he is now, where it's a lot lower in tone. It's a lot more somber when he answers questions. It's almost a little bit quieter and in some ways defensive, but not fiery. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, that's how we do it. That's our process. And, we just got to be better out there. And that's on me. And you kind of just get this, you can see it in his face and you can kind of hear it behind the words. Just this, it feels like defeat, like not a permanent waving of the white flag, but someone who realizes that, oh crap, we've lost 5 games in a row. And that's bad anytime. But we've lost 5 games in a row in a way that's probably going to cost me my job as head coach of this team. Also knowing that you have a 10-1 Detroit Lions team on the schedule this week, and that you're probably not going to beat them. Again, 10.5-point underdogs on the spread for FanDuel Sportsbook. So that'll be then 6 games in a row, including 3 straight divisional games. And that's going to be tough for any head coach to survive in year 3. This was supposed to be the step forward year, and it's been a step backwards, or at best a lateral step year. And I think that starts to sink in for Matt Eberflus more and more, especially, I think, the roller coaster of these losses in particular, right? Where I think he's left scrambling, looking for answers here, because you very well could have beat the Minnesota Vikings. You got the ball first in overtime. Like, you had many opportunities, or at least multiple opportunities, to beat the Minnesota Vikings, and your defense collapses at the end, and your offense turns back into a pumpkin in overtime. The week before that, against Green Bay, you're lining up for the game-winning field goal. You should have won that game, and you lose it by 1. And then, 3 weeks earlier, the Washington Commanders game, the Hail Mary, all that. Like, one of those, the Hail Mary game, you can maybe survive and turn some things around here, but you lose in these sort of last-minute, gut-wrenching roller coaster fashions. Like, it's not just a bad loss. Like, the Cardinals game's a bad loss where you just play like crap for 4 quarters, they kick your teeth in, and you put your tail between your legs. But like with the Commanders, Packers, and Vikings game, when you have that hope and that feeling of like, oh, we're going to win with 2 minutes left, or when you're hit 30 seconds left and 3 seconds left in regulation, you're like, we're going to win. We're going to get this together. We finally got it. And then it's a Hail Mary touchdown. And then it's a blocked field goal. And then it's a sack in overtime. And then it's Sam Darnold marching on the field in overtime. And it's like each time you truly are like, oh, we've got it. We're going to win this game. And then, oh, no, we lost again for the 3rd time in that way this season, plus the ways they lost like that in years past. And I think it's all just beating down on Matt Eberflus. And I worry about how that beats down on the rest of the team as they start to just kind of get numb to losing. And losing like this in this ways where the more you get your hopes up and lose, it's sort of the boy who cried wolf thing, right? Like, okay, you thought you were going to win twice and lost both times. The next time you think you're going to win, are you really going to truly believe you're going to win? Or if you have a lead, if you somehow get a lead late against the Detroit Lions, are you going to be looking around going, all right, what's going to go wrong this time? Are we going to block a kick? Is there going to be a fumble? Is whatever, is the defense going to fall apart? What's going to go wrong this time? Because every other time we've been close like this, it goes wrong too. And then you hear frustration from players. Like Jalen Johnson has spoken pretty publicly about how frustrating it is that they're 4-7 after this week, and that they're a better team than they were in years past, and they're still not winning football games. And Cole Kmet said on his podcast that like he and TJ Edwards were talking about growing up watching the Bears be so bad, and now they're living it, and how they feel that. They're like, man, we used to watch this on TV and see how bad they were, and that's exactly what we're playing through right now. Like this, so once the players, and not just any players, leaders on your offense and defense have that sort of deflated feeling under their belt, like, is there going to be a point here where you get down by 2 or 3 scores against the Lions and they kind of just give up? Like Caleb Williams didn't give up against the Vikings and willed them back into the game and gave them energy. But again, sort of fool me once, fool me twice. Like at some point, does this start to beat him down too? Like he's a rookie. He hasn't been here for 3, 4, 5 years of losing like Cole Kmet, Jalen Johnson, and others here. Like he's still being broken by the losing. He hasn't been brought. So you just start to wonder if our guys fully bought in. Do you guys fully believe? Are guys still going to fully play hard no matter the score, or are we going to see this team roll over after the 3rd devastating late game loss in the last 5 games, and now a really, really good Detroit Lions team on the schedule this week? It's not a good situation. It adds to the fuel of the speculation about, could the Bears fire Matt Eberflus in season? It'd be the first time in franchise history that they fire a coach during a season just because of how bad things are going to get. I still think the answer is no, but it's made for some interesting thought exercises about if they did fire him, do you make Thomas Brown the interim head coach, or what would you do next for the rest of the season? So I want to talk through the in-season firing decision and also what you might do afterwards if they were to make that historic decision on this team next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses that help you continue your education and just scratch that curious itch. If you love learning but hate how, when you went to school you were forced to have to learn whatever and you didn't really get to really enjoy it, like Hillsdale is here to rekindled that love of learning with a bunch of great online courses, including history classes like the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. They've got a classical music course. They got math and science courses, documentary style courses, all of which are self-paced. So you can start wherever you want, whenever you want, and go as you please. You can just enjoy the lectures if you want to, or you can go deeper with readings and quizzes and discussions. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon, HILLSDALE, hillsdale.edu/lockedon. I still don't think the Chicago Bears are going to fire Matt Eberflus mid-season. I think at this point, as the losses continue, his chances of coming back next year are increasing exponentially, but they have never fired a head coach during a season. And we have seen some pretty bad moments in bad seasons where you would consider firing a head coach in the past with previous coaches, that they have not been willing to do so in those moments. And so I'm not sure that, as embarrassing as Matt Eberflus is right now, this rises to the unprecedented level in franchise history to make that firing. You know, like they made John Fox finish his 5-11 season, even when they were, 3-9 at one point in that year. I mean, he had a 3-13 season the year before. Mark Trestman completely lost the locker room in 2014, and they finished 5-11. They made him finish that season, even after they lost to the Patriots 55-23 and lost to the Green Bay Packers. Patriots were 51-23. Packers were 55-14. That 55-14 loss to the Green Bay Packers, a division game that dropped to 3-6 after your bye week, felt like as embarrassing as a moment as we've seen in recent Chicago Bears history. And they didn't make the decision to fire the coach in season then. So I'm not convinced that at 4-8, after a 6 straight loss to a really good Detroit Lions team, that's going to be the time where the Bears say, this is the historic first time we're going to fire a coach in season. Like, I still feel like it would take something next level embarrassing, like, an arrest or some kind of suspension, or, like something where the Bears have to say, okay, this breaks the rules for us in a way that we have to make a change. And I don't know that losing another football game, this is going to be the loss that you fire him after. Like, you know what I mean? Like, why this loss all of a sudden? It has to have something extra to it to fire Matt Eberflus. I think the reason why it picks up steam is, there's been, I think, mostly fake Twitter people claiming to have sources saying X, Y, or Z that I don't think are particularly true. But mainly, I think they make up those things now because it's a Thursday game. So you've got an extra long week after the Thursday game where if you were going to fire a head coach, this might be the most convenient time to do so because you got 10 or 11 days or whatever it is until the next game after the Lions game, which will be at the San Francisco 49ers. So it'll be more time for a new coach, an interim head coach, to transition into that role. Again, don't think it's going to happen. But I am intrigued by the idea of like, okay, if they did do it though, would you give Thomas Brown the interim head coach job and let him audition for it over what would be the 5 remaining games in the season to see, hey, maybe he'd be the guy to be the head coach because he's a better communicator than what the Bears have had from their other coaches. He's figuring out this offense through 2 games so far. Like, could that be a worthwhile audition for him as opposed to, you'd promote defensive coordinator Eric Washington or special teams coach Richard Hightower? Like, I don't think either of them are legitimately in the conversation to be your head coach next year. So why not give Thomas Brown a shot at it and see if maybe he's head coach material? And then you could have some continuity. If you ended up making him interim and then hiring him as a head coach next year, then Caleb Williams would get to keep the same offensive voice, the same play caller, the same system, the same terminology, and have some continuity year over year. And I could see there being some value to that. Although I think a lot of Bears fans would like to aim a little bit higher among future head coaching candidates, but you might as well give Thomas Brown a shot. If you know Matt Eberflus isn't going to be your coach next year, why not see if someone else could do a better job of it for 5 weeks and audition and prove to you that, hey, actually, yeah, this is the diamond in the rough that you've been looking for as your head coach. On the other end of the spectrum, I can see the argument the other way saying, listen, Thomas Brown has figured some things out with this offense and is working really well with Caleb Williams. Don't disrupt that by adding head coach duties to his job responsibilities, because if you make him interim head coach, he's going to have to delegate a bit more on offense. He's going to have, whether it's the quarterback's coach or whoever, like be a little bit more hands-on with Caleb while Thomas Brown handles leading all the team meetings and checking in on the defense and doing head coach press conferences and all the different responsibilities that a head coach has to do that aren't just working with the quarterback and coordinating the offense. And you could risk disrupting some of that Caleb Williams development and that offensive progress by making Thomas Brown that much more hands-off with the offense that he just got to get his hands on. And on the other thing too is that it's only been 2 games. The offense has been a lot better for 2 games, but it's only been 2 games. And we've seen even bad offensive coordinators can have 2 good games. Shane Waldron had 2 good games earlier this year against the Panthers and the Jaguars, and this was 2 good games against 2 good divisional opponents. Yes, I'm not trying to say these don't matter or shouldn't count. The point being, it's a small sample size. And I think we've all been a little bit quick to say Thomas Brown is a genius who's fixed everything. And maybe he is, but let's see this play out over the course of the season. So that's where it's like, I'm not ready to just crown him head coach permanently and say he's the guy for next year, but I would give him a shot as the interim. If Ryan Poles has already decided that he's going to fire Matt Eberflus after the season, then do it now and see who else, see if Thomas Brown or somebody else can show you something as an interim that changes your equation for the interview process in the offseason. Maybe they don't. And you enter the interview process the same way that you would had you kept Matt Eberflus till the end. But what do you got to lose at the end of the day? Because you've lost 5 games in a row. You're probably going to make it 6 against Detroit. What are you going to get worse if you fire Matt Eberflus and make Thomas Brown the head coach? What are you going to do? Lose more games? Oh, shucks. They were doing that already anyway. So that's where I certainly understand and would advocate for changing the head coaching position now. I don't think they will. And if they do, I don't know if they would make Thomas Brown. I mean, I think they would probably give it to Richard Hightower because Hightower has gotten some different coaching experience, and they let him go coach at the East-West Shrine game where he was the head coach there. So I think they would probably make special teams coach Richard Hightower the interim head coach if they fired Matt Eberflus, which again, I don't think Hightower would actually be in the running to be the full-time head coach. So is it really accomplishing anything by making him the interim head coach? I don't know, but that feels like the kind of move the Bears would make here. If somehow, some way, they make a coaching change, you can be sure we'll break it down for you here on the Locked On Bears podcast. And if they don't, we'll still be here for you too, 5 days a week for your daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of that daily Bears content coming your way. It's a short week and a quick turnaround for the Lions, so we'll probably turn our attention starting tomorrow on Detroit and what we can expect out of this matchup where the Bears are huge underdogs. And we'll still have crossover Thursday with Matt Deary from Locked On Lions coming up around the corner. Deary's always been a super rational, reasonable, calm Detroit Lions analyst who, in the bad years, keeps a level head about it, but isn't a homer trying to pretend everything's great. And even when they've been good, he's been one who's been pumping the brakes a little bit, saying, guys, let's not get too carried away here too quickly. So I always enjoy talking with Matt, and he'll give us some really good insight on just how good the Lions are and what the Bears will be in store for on Thanksgiving. And then I'm not taking Black Friday off. We'll break this game down for you after the game on Thanksgiving, and we'll have a podcast for you coming out on Friday as well. I may even drop it early Thursday after the game just to get it out in advance so you can listen to it Thursday night after your Thanksgiving meal or, first thing Friday morning. We'll still figure out the scheduling on that. But either way, you know that whether it's the Thanksgiving holiday, whether the Bears win or lose, we'll still be here 5 days a week to give you another opportunity to bear down.